Okay, so the screen is visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's start. So I just quickly go through these concepts. So we would be studying the topic of environment. Okay. So first we'll briefly go through the syllabus of this environment subject. It comes under the unit 9 of paper 1. All right. The recording is happening, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fine. Okay. So so first, the topic in environment is development and environment. We'll understand about what are the Millennium Development Goals, and also they're in listed out. Okay, so I'll tell you the goals, and we'll also know about the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the goals? Okay, so these are these will come just. It's not some subjective kind of a thing. It's an objective points. Okay, the goals. Second, we go on to the human and environment interactions, the anthropogenic activities, and their impact on the environment. So, anthropogenic means it is related directly or indirectly to the humans. Okay, so how the human beings are affecting the or impacting the environment. Then we would come on to the environmental issues, which are the local, regional, and the global issues that are prevalent, which could consist of air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, noise, as well as waste pollution. Waste consists of such as solid waste, liquid, biomedical, hazardous, or electronic waste. And also, we would understand the climate change and the socio-economic and political dimensions, how the political decisions affect the environment. Well, if just a moment. Someone is adding the person. Someone is adding, or I have to keep on. Like, is there a co-host? Just a moment.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So you would be adding, right? Fine. Okay. So and the political reasons how it could affect the environment. Then we would understand the pollutants, what the pollutants are, and how they affect the health of the human being. The negative effects of pollutants on the human being. We would understand, then we would move on to the next topic of the generation of energy through the natural resources, which are the solar, wind, soil, hydro means water, geothermal, biomass, nuclear, and forest. Okay. And also, we would go on to understand the natural hazards and calamities and the disasters that happen uh, when we are not taking care of the environment, and how these put and how the activities of human beings create a negative effect on the environment, and what the mitigation strategies could be, the ways how to counteract the disasters and the calamities. Then we would learn about the Environmental Protection Act, which was proposed in 1986, which was came into charge in 1986. The National Action Plan on Climate Change, the international agreements and efforts. The international agreements are listed down, such as Montreal Protocol, Rio Summit, Convention on Biodiversity, Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreements, and International Solar Alliance. So these are the international agreements. We'll learn about them just in brief, okay? And also we would keep on studying the current affairs regarding the environment. So this is the um, syllabus of Unit 9 Environment, which is under the paper 1 of the UGC NET GRF examination, okay? So you just kind of go through this syllabus, try to learn this syllabus as well. Then we would understand the topic of ecosystem. So ecosystem is that it is a functional unit of nature where the living beings, living beings could be anything. It could be human beings, it could be animals, or any different kinds of species which interact with each other and also with the physical environment around it. So whenever there is an interaction of the living species happening among themselves and also the environment around it, that forms an ecosystem. For example, if suppose there is a place in which there is no human species, okay, Like there is a place where there is no human species, okay? And suppose some people go to that place, but since there is no human species, why there is no human species? Because their life doesn't exist. Okay, there it could be very cold region or it could be very hot region. So if people of the species live there, start living it, they could like die off after a few time, after a few days, after a few months, because the habitat is not there. There the ecosystem is not there. There could not be water, or there could be very cold. So that is why the life is sustained only in that area where the ecosystem is. An ecosystem consists of every kind of a physical environment. It must have water, it must have good temperature, it must have species around it so that the food chain is there. Suppose, for example, if there is too many wild animals, then human beings could go there, but then they might not live there completely because in a carnivores animals could eat them. Okay, so it's just that the species should also be there so as to protect the food chain for that to continue. So ecosystem is that in which the interaction of different organisms happen amongst themselves and also with the physical environment. Then we move on to the structure and the function of the ecosystem. In ecosystem, the biotic thing, what is an ecosystem? It consists of two components, the biotic and the abiotic. So when these two components interact with each other, that forms an ecosystem. Biotic is the living forms and the abiotic is the non-living forms. Okay, so biotic could be any kind of species, animals, birds, insects, whatever, human beings. Abiotic could be temperature, humidity, sunlight, etc. Okay, so non-living components that also helps in preserving the life of the human beings and other species of life. Okay, so global ecosystem, the biosphere, like all the layers we understand, lithosphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, but then biosphere is something in which the life exists. That is called biosphere. Okay, so wherever the sphere of the earth in which the life exists is called the biosphere. It is regarded as a global ecosystem because in that global ecosystem, every kind of species of life is prevalent. The water is there, every kind of species are there. So it's not just one small area scattered around the entire world. Okay, that is called biosphere. And the vertical distribution of the species that occupies the different levels, it's called the stratification. For example, the top layers and the bottommost layer, the distribution among the species is called as the stratification. For example, the topmost layer, as you can see in the diagram, it's the emergent layer. The second one is the canopy, then comes the understory, the fourth one is shrub, and the fifth one is the ground layer. So this is how the different trees are stratified according to the different vertical distribution. And these are the layers. Okay, so not that much important. Okay, and the next we go on to the biotic factors. So I explained it previously. The biotic factors, which are the living factors, how they contribute to the environment. Okay, so ducks, fish, plants, and bacteria. Okay, so for example, if there's an insect, if there's too many insects in the environment, then that could create problems for the human beings. So for the food chain to be maintained, there could be some other species in the food chain which could kill that insect that would maintain the life of the ecosystem. So that is why the biotic factors, how the living beings, living species contribute, have an effect, have their impact on the ecosystem so as to preserve the balance. Okay, so this is how the biotic factors contribute. And the abiotic factors, the sunlight, temperature, soil composition, and pH of the water. Okay, so this affects in such a way that suppose if there is too much sunlight, if it's too hot, okay, then the preservation of life also could be very different. It could not be like it could not be highly densely populated. Okay, if the sunlight is it's almost nil. Okay, like in 6 months, only once comes the sunlight, or you are able to see the get the direct impact of the sunlight. There also the population would be less. So the abiotic factors also directly impact the ecosystem. Okay, and if suppose there is some region in the earth where is there is good ample sufficient amount of sunlight, not neither too high nor too low, so there the population would be high, the temperature is moderately maintained, the population could be high, the species would be living very happily. Okay, so that is why. And wherever the difference is in the abiotic factors, the species would also have a different kind of characteristics and features according to that region, such that they are able to withstand those abiotic factors that are prevalent in that region. For example, if you go into the desert, then the body of the camel is such that it is able to withstand that temperature. You go to a very cold region, the polar bears, they have such kind of a body that they're able to withstand that abiotic factors of very less sunlight, very low temperature, like that. Okay. So the composition, the characteristics of the body of this living species also varies according to that. Okay. Next comes Next comes about the Earth. So just some basic information, need not to remember it. Earth is roughly around 4 to 5 billion years old. Its third planet after the Sun. It comes at the third position, orbiting around the Sun. Okay, Sun is at the center. The third circle is the third orbit in which the name of the planet which is orbiting around the Sun is called the Earth. So it is the only planet in the solar system that is known to consist of the liquid water. Okay, so water could be consisting in many other forms, in the ice, other forms, but the liquid water on the surface, the liquid water which can be consumed by the human being so as to able to sustain the life is only the Earth, and it is the only planet which is only known to um, like gather the life, sustain the life in the universe. Okay. There's more depth to it. So we are not able to understand like the science and technology is progressing. So we are able to understand if other kinds of species are also living their life in other planets. So the research is still going on. Okay. Now we'll go on to the atmosphere. So atmosphere is kind of these are the gases. It consists of the gases that envelop and surround the Earth. Okay, so that is called the atmosphere. Consists of the gases that envelop, like kinds of shield and surround the Earth. What it functions is that it protects from the ultraviolet rays. Okay, so ultraviolet rays, the direct incident of ultraviolet rays from the sunlight, okay, it's harmful for the skin and it could be harmful for other species as well. So atmosphere protects us from that. Another function of atmosphere is that it balances the global temperature on the Earth, and it consists of various gases. That gases can be multiple gases such as nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, CO2, water vapor, ozone, and many others. Okay, so atmosphere is an envelope that shields against the UV rays, maintaining the global temperature on the Earth and consists of various gases. Now we'll understand the layers of atmosphere. The bottommost layer, which is close to the surface of the Earth, is the troposphere. It is from bottom of the crust till to the position where we are standing to the upward vertical 10 kilometers high. That is troposphere. Then from 10 kilometer to next 40 kilometers is stratosphere. Then from the 40 kilometers above that, 50 kilometers width is the mesosphere, and the 300-kilometer width beyond the mesosphere is thermosphere, and at the 400th kilometer altitude and beyond that till infinity is the exosphere. So remember the names of the layers: the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. Okay. And the function of that is the troposphere, it consists of 80% of all the air. The stratosphere, it absorbs the most of the ultraviolet radiations. Mesosphere, you can remember mesosphere and meteorites, so kind of, like both starts with M, so you can kind of remember like this. Okay, so it protects the Earth from meteorites. Thermosphere, Thermos, so understand thermo temperature. Temperature means, it can burn up the most meteorites up here. So you can remember it like this. Okay. So most of the meteorites are burned up at this layer. That is why it's called thermosphere. Okay. Next, we go on to the hydrosphere. So one student yesterday asked it out. So, okay. So how the distribution of water happens on Earth. So I'll tell it to you. It's like if there is 100% of water that is prevalent on this surface of the Earth. Okay. Out of that 100% water, 97% of it it's inside the ocean. Ocean consists of 97% of that 300, of that 100% of the water. The remaining 3% is, now we would understand what is the remaining 3% of that water. So that remaining 3% is, now we go on to that, how it is forming a subset. 77% of that remaining 3% consists of the ice caps, glaciers, and the inland seas. 22% of that 3% consists of the groundwater. Okay, so this is how the water is distributed on Earth. 22% of that 3% is groundwater. And the remaining 1%, now we will understand how that remaining 1% is distributed. Remaining 1% of water is distributed. So the lake consists of 61%, the atmosphere soil moisture consists of 39%, and the rivers consist of less than, not even exactly 0.4%. So it's not 4%, it's 0.4%. Okay, so almost 100%, like less than 100% is this, and less than 0.4% is the rivers. So 0.4% of 0.1% of 0.3% is the actual amount of water that is distributed on the earth, actual amount of water in the form of rivers. Okay, so it's like this. Then we move on to the lithosphere. So till now, like any confusion or doubts? Are you understanding things?
Yes, sir.
Or fine? Are you like the pace is fine, or should I speed it up or slow it down?
Okay, sir.
Huh? Beg your pardon. Pace is fine, right?
Yes, sir. Go on.
Yes,
Okay,
sir, it is good.
okay, okay. Good. Thanks. So now we'll understand the various spheres of the Earth. Okay, so first one is the lithosphere. Okay, so it's just at the topmost position. Okay, it comprises of the Earth's crust. The crust is the outermost layer of the Earth, and the below is the mantle, and below that is the core. So core is almost the central part. Then comes the mantle surrounding the core, and surrounding the mantle is the crust. So lithosphere is consisting of the Earth's crust and the upper mantle, not even the lower mantle, the upper part of the mantle that consists of the lithosphere. And what all is inside the lithosphere, like what all it consists of? It consists of the oceanic crust, and also it consists of the continental crust. What is the oceanic crust? Oceanic crust is that part of the crust in which you can see the 97% of the oceans, like I told you in the previous slide. So the water bodies on the part of the crust, that is called the oceanic crust. Okay, and the remaining part of the earth in which there is land, okay, so that is called as the continental crust, in which there are 7 continents of the earth, and all the countries are distributed in those continents. Okay, so that is the continental crust. Okay. Next we would understand about the biosphere. Biosphere, so like there has been many sphere, okay, lithosphere and other spheres, hydrosphere, lithospheres, and mesosphere, troposphere, stratosphere, exosphere. Okay, but what is biosphere? As you can see, as you can just break down the word bio and sphere. Bio means kind of, life, or where could the region where the life exists. Bio. Okay. So it is that sphere, that region in which the life exists. Biosphere consists of all the three parts. It consists of the atmosphere, the hydrosphere, and the lithosphere. So it could be a possibility in lithosphere some species could live, those kinds of so some kind of species could live. In hydrosphere also there are species which live, okay, the aquatic animals. But in biosphere, every kind of species live. Okay, so that is called biosphere. At atmosphere also there could be some form of species that could live. Okay, but biosphere consists of all these three parts that combines and forms it. So it consists of maximum number of species that live. All right, so this is called as biosphere, where the life exists, the region where the life exists. So as you can see in the diagram, there is a circle that has been formed. So this is the biosphere. It consists of this blue hydrosphere. It consists of some part of lithosphere, consists of the atmosphere, and you can see the trees, you can see the factories, you can see everything. So that is called biosphere. Right. So now we'll understand the like the types of ecosystem. There are three types of ecosystem. One is the terrestrial ecosystem, second is the aquatic ecosystem, and third is a man-made ecosystem. Okay. So the terrestrial ecosystem is that which has been formed by itself. Okay. It consists of the forest, grassland, and the desert. All right. So there is like the species live. So the species that can survive on the land, that place which consists of the land is called as the terrestrial ecosystem. It consists of the forest, grassland, and the desert. Okay. Aquatic system is which consists of the water bodies. So the species living in those ecosystem which consist of the water bodies is called as the aquatic ecosystem. Okay. It consists of the pond, lake, wetland, river, and estuaries. All right. Next, third point is the man-made ecosystem. Man-made ecosystem is not that has been formed naturally by itself, but by the human beings' interaction with the physical environment. They have created themselves such kind of an ecosystem so as to gain some kind of a purpose. Like there has been an objective behind it. That's why they kind of create this kind of an ecosystem. So for example, if they create an aquarium, so the reason of creating aquarium is that they want these species, the aquatic animals, to be able to live in that. So there could be a possibility that the water bodies could be declining. Okay, so okay, in a positive sense, I'm just telling that. Okay, so they have created an aquarium at one place, and that filled with water body, and then the species, aquatic species, have been raised in that so that they are able to survive, because without the water the aquatic species would not be able to survive. The crop feeds are being created so that they could grow up the crops so that it could be used as the food that can be produced after it has been harvested. That is why the human beings intentionally create the ecosystem which is called the man-made ecosystem, so as to able to fulfill a desired purpose in life. Okay. Next, we understand the non-living components of the ecosystem. Non-living components of the ecosystem are called as the abiotic factors. Okay, so so what are the abiotic factors? The temperature, the atmosphere, the water, wind, sunlight, and soil. How the wind affects the ecosystem in the environment. Suppose if there is too much wind, okay, so there the trees would be very thick. The trees would have a very thick trunk so as to be able to withstand that level of the wind force. Okay, if suppose there would be extreme level of sunlight, then that region would be very much dry and barren. The people living over there would be adaptable to such kind of a condition. Suppose I gave you an example of camel, okay, the species. So such kind of a body. So the polar bear would not be able to live in a desert, okay, in a very hot desert. All right. So that is why these factors also affect the ecosystem. Due to these factors, the different kinds of species live in that region. Okay. The soil, for example, if there is too much soil in one place, then certain kinds of species would be able to adjust to that environment. And if in the other place there is less soil, okay, then the different kinds of species stay over there and are able to withstand that kind of environment. The temperature plays a major role. If the temperature is very low at certain places, then the bodies of human beings are also such that they are able to naturally withstand that kind of temperature. For example, like I saw a YouTube video in which people living in very extremely cold environment, okay, so they live in such a way that their body is so very it's withstand the cold temperature so easily that when the temperature over there is like minus 30 minus 20 degrees Celsius, they are just wearing normal like one or two sweaters, okay, which in suppose India or in Delhi we used to wear like, for example, just at 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. They keep the food in the refrigerator in the very cold environment just to make it hot, because if they keep it outside, if they open the window, it drop the water outside and the water freezes. Okay, it freezes even in the midair. So it depends. The temperature has a very crucial role in affecting the ecosystem. Then comes the atmosphere, like the atmosphere, the level of oxygen, and whether it is pure or not, whether the environment, the for example, if at some area there is a lot of pollution, in another areas there is less pollution, so that is natural that the species in the less polluted area will be more and will be living a more healthy life, not just about the human beings but every kind of species, okay. And where there would be more of pollution, then they can lead to more kinds of diseases, respiratory diseases. So this also have a very crucial role in affecting the ecosystem and have a direct as well as an indirect impact on the human beings. Then we understand the water, the content, the humidity, the level of moisture, the level of humidity, the water level at certain places. So that also affects the ecosystem. Okay, for example, if the water level is high at some places, then there are different kinds of vegetation and crops in that area. If the water level is very less at certain places, so the plants would be also very different, like cactus or some other kinds of plants that would naturally grow in that region, so as to be able to withstand the low moisture content or environment in that region. Okay. So these are the similar things. Okay, the temperature, water, light, and soil, the abiotic factors that I just told. So first we understand about the temperature. Okay, the one of the abiotic factors that affects the ecosystem. It's the most ecologically relevant factors. Like told you, I gave you the examples. So in temperature on land varies seasonally. For example, when it's the month in, for example, in India, when the temperature is, when the month is about like maybe from October to next February or March, the temperature is reduced. From March beginning to September, the temperature is kind of increased. So that is why it's saying that temperature on land varies seasonally. At different season, the temperature varies. Okay, and it also decreases or decreases according to the distance from the equator to the poles and from the plains to the mountains, and it's about the latitude and also about the longitude. Okay, so for example, if we go on to the equator, the temperature is high. Nearer to the poles, the temperature is very less. And if we go vertically up, the temperature is less at mountains and it's a little bit high at plains. All right, so this is, and also like it's mentioned that its temperature is almost greater than 50 degree in tropical deserts. So from it ranges from sub-zero levels in polar areas and high altitudes such as mountains to more than 50 degree in tropical deserts. Okay, nearer to the equators like that, and very much below, very much less high. Okay, less altitude. And average temperature in thermal spring. Okay, and deep sea hydrothermal vents. Okay, so in the thermal spring, what is the thermal spring? Suppose there are some regions on the land, okay, in which the water that comes from below the ground, okay, so those are like it's very much nearer to the mantle. Okay, so the temperature of that water in that certain area is very high. Okay, so it can be which it's called as a hydrothermal vents also. Okay, so deep down in the sea, the hydrothermal vents, the openings on the land in which the water comes out at a very high temperature is called the hydrothermal vents, a deep sea hydrothermal vents. Okay, so temperature of those springs could also exceed beyond 100 degrees Celsius. All right. So there are some other examples of how the temperature affects the ecosystem, like the mango trees. They cannot grow in temperate countries. Okay, so it needs a little bit higher temperature and not very cold areas. So that's why the mangoes naturally do not grow in countries like Canada and Germany. Okay, as you can see, you cannot find any snow leopard. You can see the snow leopard in the picture. Okay, you cannot find them in the Kerala forest because the um, temperature that the snow leopard needs to able to withstand is very less, which is very high in the Kerala forest. So it is not able to live in that region. And then we also know another example how temperature affects the ecosystem. The tuna fishes, which are very much rare beyond the tropical latitudes in the ocean. Okay, so just below that, it is able to we are able to find it, but beyond that, we are not able to find the tuna fishes. Okay, so temperature affects the kinetics of the enzymes, the basal metabolism, and other physiological functions of the organism. The physiological function in basal metabolism consists of the functioning of the internal system of the body. It's called the physiological functions. Okay, it's about the structure of the body is called the anatomy, and how the functions, how the internal organs and system of the body of the how these system and the organs work inside the body, that is called the physiological functions. Okay, so temperature is also, it directly affects these functions as well. All right. So now we'll understand about based on the range of the thermal tolerance. Okay, thermal tolerance is the how you can tolerate, how much temperature you can tolerate. Okay, so organisms can be of two types. One is the eurythermal, and the another is the stenothermal. Okay, so what is a eurythermal types of organism? So those are the organisms which can tolerate wide range of temperatures. Okay, so these are the eurythermal types of species, and those which can tolerate only very narrow range of temperatures, those are called the stenothermal species. Okay, so very less is the gap or the width of the temperature difference to which these species can tolerate. So these are the stenothermal. Okay. Now we move on to the next abiotic factor, which is the water. So till now, any doubts or confusion, or are you with me?
Yes, sir.
All fine?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay. So you can, okay, yeah. Okay. So we continue now. Just a moment. So we were on slide number, yeah, we were here. Okay. Okay. So now the next factor, which is the abiotic factor, which contributes to the ecosystem, is called the water. Okay. So desert organism have special adaptation to limited water. All right. So with so what it means is that those species, they have such kind of a characteristic feature inside their body, the gift of the god, such that in such areas where if suppose me myself giving as a person example or some other person. Okay, suppose we live in a normal temperate area. Okay, so if we go to a deserted area, like within few minutes or after few hours, only within few hours, we would be feeling very thirsty. We would need a lot of water intake, otherwise we would be dehydrated, and that could also significantly deteriorate our health as well. Okay, but by the gift of the God, the creation of such a good form of life, that they have put many species on such places that they're able to adapt to such condition, and their body are such that they're adaptable to such environment. Okay, a camel has such kind of a body in which it is adaptable to the limited water. Even if there is less water, still the camel would be able to walk a lot of miles, okay, and without needing the water as well. And then productivity and distribution of plants is also dependent upon water. Suppose if there is more of water at a place, then there would be different kinds of plant and different kinds of species or the types of plant on that region where the water would be very high. And if suppose the water level is very low at certain places, then there will be different kinds of species of the plant. For example, the cactus that is found mostly in the deserted area, because it is able to sustain its life even with less water intake. Okay, but if you put some other tree, the normal tree which you can see, which needs a lot of water into a deserted area, it would just die off within few days. Okay, so this is also, the water also contributes very significantly in the ecosystem. Next, we understand the for the aquatic organisms. Okay, the water quality is important. Okay, for example, what is the water quality? Water quality is chemical composition. Chemical composition, for example, in the um, the water consists water. The chemical formula of water is H2O. Okay, so it consists of two molecules of hydrogen which binds with one molecule of the oxygen. Okay, the covalent bond, the bond that is formed between them. Okay, so in that bond, the chemical composition is such that the oxygen component is enough for the sustenance of the life of the aquatic animals. For example, we as a human beings, the chemical composition of air is such that it consists less of water, more of air, more of oxygen, such that we are able to breathe in more. For example, if the chemical composition of air would have been significantly altered in such a way that the water composition would have been more, then we could not have been able to survive. If okay, so it's like that. The water composition of in the water bodies, the water qualities in the oceanic body is high. That is why the aquatic species are even able to live, are able to even breathe inside the water. We cannot breathe inside the water. When we breathe, it's less of the air that goes inside the mouth and more of the water that will enter inside the mouth, and we would be underwater and we would eventually die. So it's about the chemical composition also affects drastically in the sustenance of life. The pH is also important. What is pH? The power of hydrogen. So there is a scale of till the level number 14. From 0 to 7, it's acidic. Seventh number is the neutral. And after that, 7 to 14 is the basic. So the water composition, the water quality is also affects. If suppose the area is little bit more acidic, and certain kinds of species would be able to live in that area, and not most of the species. If the species, if the water composition, the pH level would be basic, then it could be a possibility. Then some other forms of species would be able to live in that area. Okay, and secondly, salt concentration also affects the environment. Salt concentration is less than 5, like it's called as the salinity, like less than 5. So the unit is called as the salinity in parts per thousand. Okay, so less than 5 in parts per thousand salinity, that concentration is in inland waters, and the salt concentration is pretty high in sea, which is approximately 30 to 35, and it is very high, greater than 100, in hypersaline lagoons. So, in such a way, in inland waters, the salt concentration is less. So that inland waters, you can, even drink that water. Like if suppose there are some rivers, like usually people, like nowadays water filter is being utilized, but earlier times, and the health is also being deteriorated by it if you use too much of chemicals in the water. But as you know that earlier times, those people living nearer to the rivers, the villages which were very much nearer to the rivers, so they used to consume the direct water, okay, when it was very much pure, in the pure form, okay. So the salt concentration was very less in that river, okay, that's why it was consumable. The seawater is not directly consumable because it consists of very high salt concentration. And hypersaline lagoons consist of such kind of species which are able to, which live in that kind of an environment. Okay, so this is all for today. So we will continue this topic from tomorrow. All right. So if you have any doubts or queries, so you can tell me. So did you all understand what all has been taught for today?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. So speed was fine, right? Or it was low, but it was slow or normal.
Okay, sir.
Understandable.
Okay. Okay, then thank you so much. So we can end this meeting.